The ground began to crack, and Helmut warned our young companion that the dungeon was collapsing. He asked her what would happen when it completely disintegrated. Surprised by the question, Aaliyah explained that they would be erased along with the subspace when its structure entirely disappeared. He asked her to come closer, saying that he wanted to rebuild the dungeon. Covering her hand with his magic, he admitted that he wasn't sure he could do it with the little energy he had left. Having no other option, he decided to try. He placed his hand on the earth and activated a magic circle, which immediately emitted an intense light. The subspace structure began to stabilize, halting the destruction. Helmut looked around and confirmed that the collapse had been completely stopped. Then he asked her how she felt, if she could get up. Aaliyah raised her hand and cast a spell, opening a portal inside the subspace. He informed her that he had created an exit, although he didn't know where it would lead. Breathing heavily, she begged Helmut to take her through the portal for now, as his mana had been completely exhausted. He warned that she might lose consciousness at any moment, and as soon as he said this, she fell to the ground, unconscious. Our protagonist was surprised to see her like that. He called out urgently with concern in his voice. The scene changed, taking us to a mountain range. Helmut was emerging from a cave, with Aaliyah on his back. He looked down and saw a forest surrounding him. He wondered where they were and remembered that Aaliyah had mentioned she didn't know where they would arrive. He felt that he couldn't take her back to the school in such a state, so he decided to look for a suitable place to rest until she woke up. He left the cave and went into the forest, finding a clearing where he could spread out a mat. Carefully, he laid Aaliyah on it. At that moment, he remembered that the dungeon had shown him Aaliyah's past, as well as his own history. He realized it would be impossible to simply ignore that, especially with someone like her. He wondered if he should eliminate any future threats right there, cultivating a deep doubt. As he watched her, his stomach began to growl after he exhausted all the food they had packed for the trip. He decided to get up and look for something to hunt, but before taking a step, he stopped. It wasn't wise to leave Aaliyah unconscious alone on that mountainous trail. While pondering, he sensed a strange presence. Immediately, he placed his hand on his sword. His darkness seed reacted to that. Helmut perceived a divine power in the air, and at that moment, the suffocating feeling of presumption intensified, confirming to him that something powerful was approaching. A group of knights bearing the temple's symbol approached him confidently. One of them seemed surprised to notice someone in this remote place. He questioned Casco about what he was doing among those mountains, asking him to clearly identify himself. The young man stared intently at the gentleman, perceiving that he remained in a defensive posture. Then, the knight assured him that they were sacred knights of the Temple of Lumen and that he had no reason to suspect them. His companion added that he and Aaliyah were simply children. Casco recalled that he had heard about the sacred knights, warriors in service of the temple. It was the first time he saw them in person, and he noticed that a shadow of darkness he carried seemed to retreat in the presence of divine power. He understood that only priests could sense that seed of darkness, even when nearby. Therefore, he decided to talk to them and told them that they were students of the Greta Academy, resting briefly after a training mission on their way back. The leading knight was surprised to hear they came from that academy. He remembered he was in Ben, and assured them they came from a very distant place. He asked if Aaliyah also studied at the same institution. Casco confirmed that she did, adding that she was a mage traveling with him. He further explained that Aaliyah would not wake up soon because her mana had been exhausted. He thought that if they simply let them go, there would be no need to kill the knights and cause a conflict. The knights carefully observed Aaliyah, commenting among themselves on how beautiful she was. One of them said that her beauty seemed divine blessing. Then he asked if Aaliyah was really a man. Another insisted that he couldn't believe someone so beautiful was a male, saying she would have been his type if she were a woman. His friend asked him to stop with such nonsense and questioned whether, with that appearance, a woman so beautiful could be attracted to someone like him. While they talked, Casco sensed someone else's presence. A priest approached them and asked if he had said that he studied at the Greta Academy. The figure turned out to be High Priest Mykian. One of the knights explained that Casco and Aaliyah were exhausted from the journey, and perhaps one of them had caught their attention. He proposed guiding them to the temple so they could rest, and even having the priest give them a blessing. The priest decided to examine the travelers. He quickly approached the young woman, observing her carefully. Then he turned to Casco, scrutinizing him attentively. Immediately, he recognized what was in him, and with a firm order, he instructed the knights to lower their weapons from Casco. Before they could understand what was happening, Casco took advantage of the confusion and stabbed one of the knights in the chest. He looked intensely at Mykian. The scene changed and we moved to the Greta Academy, specifically to the dean's office. The image showed his figure looking out the window, immersed in his thoughts. Recalling that conversation with Mike, the high priest explained that he had come to request permission. The dean asked what he needed authorization for, and Mike revealed that to the northwest of Ben, there was a forest owned by the Greta Academy. The priest expressed his desire to explore it just once. Since there were no real reasons to deny his request, the dean granted him permission, though he was curious about Mykian's plans. He hoped that nothing bad would happen. High Priest Alexandro Mykian was traditionally seen as a devout and honest man, respected by all. However, in reality he was a corrupt man, filled with uncontrollable desires for men. His interest in the forest stemmed from his suspicion that Greta Academy was hiding secrets there. The accidental appearance of Helmut and Aaliyah had nothing to do with his intentions. Seeing Aaliyah lying on the ground, so perfect, a dark urge to possess her overwhelmed Mykian. But at that moment, his desire was overshadowed by something that should not have existed there. The priest informed the sacred knights that Helmut carried a seed of darkness. He ordered them to strengthen their formation and capture him. Helmut swiftly covered his sword with a veil of darkness and charged at the men. At the moment he launched his attack, the sacred knights created shields of light that blocked his assault. Mike unleashed his divine energy and directed it at the young man. Helmut avoided the strike and reappeared behind Mykian, striking him on the head with his sword. One of the knights appeared above Mykian and, with a blow, pushed Helmut away from him. Our protagonist realized that prolonging the fight against beings wielding divine power would be disadvantageous, so he decided to use all his sight to eliminate the priest. He ventured into the forest, quickly dodging its trees and branches. The knights were astonished by Helmut's speed. One of them asked if a human could move like that, and his companion replied that it was due to the seed of darkness he possessed, comparing him to a demonic beast. At that moment, Helmut stopped circling the knights and, swiftly, charged from a lateral angle toward Mykian, who protected himself behind his shield. Helmut struck in all directions, but his attacks were blocked. Mike felt that the situation was strange. He knew that any bearer of the seed of darkness would feel tightly trapped just by being near divine energy. It was practically impossible for them to move normally when concentrating that energy. The truth was that Helmut moved with almost inhuman speed, beyond natural limits. He understood that if he allowed Helmut to continue attacking like this, it would be he himself who would break that resistance. So, he raised his hands and concentrated a small amount of divine energy. He activated a sacred spell known as the Guardian Totem of the Luminary Religion. As soon as he did, a colossal statue of light emerged above him and the knights. The statue pushed Helmut back, leaving him stunned by the powerful manifestation. Mike quickly turned to Aaliyah and, without hesitation, ordered his knights to attack the mage. Helmut was in shock upon hearing the order and saw the knights charging towards Aaliyah. Without hesitation, he climbed onto a nearby tree and ran in her direction, using his body to protect her from the attacks. Blood was pouring from his body as he swung his sword, gradually holding back the knights. But the offensive did not stop. A third knight, holy and determined, lunged at him. As he struggled to defend himself, Mike unleashed a large amount of divine energy against Helmut. The mage clenched his teeth and withstood the attack, blocking another sword strike. At that moment, Helmut remembered how the dungeon had revealed a part of Aaliyah's past. He recalled her tears over her grandmother's betrayal, accused of actions against the temple. Her family was attacked, and she was the only survivor, taken in by Hika and living a childhood marked by darkness. That is why Aaliyah feels a deep rejection of the temple. Recently, Helmut had also been thinking about something important. He remembered that his first real contact with Aaliyah was during the Academy's test, when she helped him. Over time, Helmut met more people, but none felt as special as she did. He pondered why Aaliyah was the only one capable of touching his soul. The vision the dungeon showed him provided the answer, filling him with a single hope, that Aaliyah could accept her past. Even with Luke, sharing a bond with Darien, Helmut couldn't confess the truth to him. He wondered if Aaliyah would understand that boy who only longed to be human. He realized he never asked her about it. As he was lost in thought, the high priest unleashed another wave of divine power upon him. The seed of darkness he carried in his chest reacted to the attack. Helmut felt intense pain. Mike, disdainful, called Helmut a cockroach, unable to believe he could withstand so much divine power. He was sure Helmut would soon reach his limit. In that instant, the boy unleashed a large amount of demonic energy and, with a single strike of his sword, decapitated the three knights. Mike stood in awe, unable to believe what he was seeing. Helmut succumbed to the power of his darkness seed. He told himself he couldn't allow himself to lose Aaliyah there. His eyes turned black, and several lines appeared on his face, emanating a vast aura of demonic energy. While Aaliyah slept, he thought about what the dungeon had revealed about Helmut. He felt that his destiny was too heavy for him alone to bear. She knew that Helmut yearned more than anyone to become human, but he was trapped in a loneliness that prevented him from interacting with others. She feared that this same loneliness would lead him down a dangerous path. Understanding his solitude, Helmut couldn't help but worry about himself. While she remained in a trance, Mike and Helmut exchanged intense glances, each filled with their own questions and unresolved tensions. The high priest expressed surprise at the unexpected outbreak of darkness semen, which seemed to have gotten out of control again. He assured that the temple had invested tremendous effort to prevent such occurrences. With an expression of anger, he made it clear to our young friend that some always managed to evade the temple's watchful eyes and reappear every few years to cause chaos. He asked Helmut if he didn't understand how selfish it was to try to live in the human world. Helmut seemed to grasp what the priest explained and adopted a firm stance. He disappeared in front of Mike and, in seconds, reappeared above him, drawing his sword toward his neck. Although Mike couldn't see Helmut clearly, he managed to conjure the temple's guardian totem of the Lumen religion once more. The statue pushed our young friend backward. Helmut swung his sword at the statue, which resisted the blow, but everything behind Mike was erased in an instant. The high priest was stunned, unable to believe what his eyes were witnessing. Everything the young man's energy touched disintegrated instantly. Without hesitation, he concentrated his divine power into an attack to repel Helmut. Disappointed, he didn't understand what was happening, as he had expected his heart to burn after receiving so much celestial energy. However, Helmut was still alive, which confused him even more. He decided to change his strategy. He formed several enormous crosses around our young friend, which cast chains that strongly restrained him. The crosses built a large cage, known as the Sanctuary of Lucille. Mike explained to Helmut that, at the moment his darkness seed manifested, he ceased to be a target for capture and was now a target for elimination. He indicated that he would send him to the side of Lumen. Helmut, ignoring his words, headed toward the chains. He concentrated a large amount of demonic energy and attempted to break them. His power destroyed the ground beneath his feet. Mike couldn't believe that our young friend still resisted his divine energy. He noticed that Helmut had not lost his reason, and although his darkness seed had gotten out of control, the transformation into a demonic beast was progressing much more slowly than expected. Realizing this, he knew that only the best swordsman could handle such a situation. Before exhausting all his strength, Helmut focused his last effort into his heart, using it as a shield. Moreover, the repeated divine energy strikes indirectly helped suppress the darkness seed. Mike, unconsciously, found himself helping our young man without intending to. Meanwhile, Casco continued to release demonic energy and fought to break free from his chains. Mike explained that he was not a suitable opponent for him. He told him that no matter how dense his demonic energy was, in the face of celestial power it was like a few drops sprinkled into the sea. Then he smiled and unleashed his divine power, thanking Casco for allowing him to discover the Academy's weakness. He confessed that he was now certain that Greta Academy harbored a seed of darkness. The young man had assured our boy that he would guide him to Lumen with as little pain as possible. At that moment, the crosses began to glow intensely. Mike begged Lord Parents Lumen to accept this lost sheep, and the very instant he uttered those words, a burst of energy surged forth and stripped him of his hand. The priest was stunned by this unexpected reaction and turned to see who had attacked him. Before his eyes appeared our girl, standing behind him, and he let out a cry of pain. He couldn't understand why Aaliyah had attacked him. He asked who she was. She responded that he was right in his observation. Indeed, they were not a good match. She told him he would have to face two of his worst enemies simultaneously. At that moment, she confirmed her words. Mike recognized her face and realized she was Hikura's granddaughter. Aaliyah smiled and asked if he had time to worry about her. At that moment, the mask she was wearing on her head shattered, releasing her energy and launching herself at him. Quickly, Mike created a shield to block the attack. Fury overtook him, and he activated an extreme divine spell known as Cariel's Sacred Spear Rain. Several enormous spears emerged from the sky. When Aaliyah saw the offensive, she called for help to Casco, and our boy looked up, watching the spears fall. Before he could react, the weapons destroyed everything in their path, raising a cloud of dust into the air. Mike approached to check if he had finished off our young man. When the dust settled, the high priest saw Aaliyah on her knees, conjuring a portal in the upper space to divert the spears. He realized that Casco had not been hit. Turning around, he saw Casco raising his sword. Then the priest understood that Aaliyah and Casco had exchanged their positions. Our boy charged from one side, coating his sword with a large amount of demonic energy, and the blade grew enormously. Quickly, Mike covered his hand with his energy, but before he could act, a chain emerged from the ground and trapped his hand. The high authority watched Aaliyah, who was casting the spell with a smile on her face. She asked him to simply accept the blow and die silently. This deeply irritated the priest, who clenched his teeth in anger and called Aaliyah an unforgivable traitor. At that moment, the helmet swung its sword and unleashed a colossal amount of energy. The attack tore through Mike and shattered everything around him, filling the air with dust. Aaliyah fell to her knees, struggling to breathe, and lifted her head to call out to the helmet. To her surprise, our young hero was fighting to stay on his feet, breathing heavily. She noticed that the demonic energy that had been stagnant in his body was becoming denser. She wondered if the helmet would be able to control it with its vis. Quickly, it drew her attention. At that moment, the helmet pointed its sword at her. Aaliyah was stunned. She stood up and touched her collar, causing her transformation magic to dissipate. Her hair flowed gently over her shoulders, accentuating her figure with a more feminine grace. She explained to the helmet that she was not his enemy and that this was a place where someone like him, used to pointing his sword in all directions, could lower his weapon and rest. With a delicate smile, she told him she would approach him herself. Seeing her come closer, the helmet adopted a defensive stance, aiming his sword at her neck. A concern that had been weighing on him for a long time hovered. Who could stop her if one day she lost her way and made a mistake like Hikura's? Aaliyah extended her hand and embraced him, reminding him that this was a debt he owed her and that someday, in the future, he would have to repay her favor. Feeling her body, the helmet believed he could trust her and lowered his guard, causing his eyes to regain their usual expression. Aaliyah hoped that our protagonist could fulfill that promise regardless of the difficulties ahead. The scene shifted to a gazebo where a servant of Mikhail was picking up some documents from a table. Mikhail informed his mother that the papers were ready. He told her that Ben's 3 friends would also participate in the fencing tournament and expressed concern because it was the first time he was organizing such an event. He asked if she thought he would do well. The woman smiled and assured him yes, trusting in his ability. She added that he was too nervous and suggested he drink the chamomile tea on the table, as it calmed the mind. Mikhail took the infusion and thanked her, while Robert handed her the documents with all the details of the tournament. Mikhail's mother said she was curious to see what kind of swordsman would arrive in Reno to participate in such a special competition. The scene shifted to a snow-covered landscape, where several bodies lay on the ground, while a man emanating intense demonic energy stood above the victims. This man carried within him a seed of darkness. When someone called the protagonist by name nearby, he turned toward that person. It can be said that this has been the final installment of the 3rd season of Helmet, The Forgotten Boy. For me, it has been a true pleasure to share this incredible series with you. The 4th season will begin in approximately 2 months, and I promise to bring you more content as soon as it becomes available. Thank you for accompanying this journey with your support, likes, and subscriptions. I wish you all a happy new year and a life full of adventures. I eagerly look forward to the next release so we can continue enjoying more stories together.